Most of us have been at this for more than 20 years, and we're tired. Tired of hearing people think that they have no hope, no future, and that they will simply sit in their cubicles and survive working in IT. Well, we're here to tell you right here, right now, that you can thrive in IT, and we are going to prove it.
Bringing you great stories
About great people in information technology
that it turns out are just like you. Welcome to THRIVEcast. All right, everybody, welcome back to THRIVEcast. This is episode 48. Yeah, good to be back. It's gonna be awesome. It's gonna be a great show today. I'm looking forward to this a lot. Mostly because I just love having old friends and people I've gotten to know over the years on the show and getting to know more about them and learning things that I didn't even know. And there's gonna be plenty of that tonight. So glad you're with us. Let's bring on my co-host, Jeff Pitch. Welcome, Jeff.
Hello, hello, hello. Yes, last week, an unexpected week off.
Yeah,
It was a bummer, but, real life crops up for the guest, and, we wish Warren well.
Yeah, for sure. In honor, though, I've got to wear I'm wearing my All Blacks anyway.
Wait. Did you just say in honor? You're wearing a New Zealand shirt in honor of an Australian?
Hey, that's right. That's how we roll around.
Ooh, man.
I was gonna wear my Australia shirt, but it's more of a beach wear kind of a shirt. It's a little bit not as broadcast friendly, I'm afraid. So
yeah, I'm not sure that's going to be broadcast friendly at this point. So,
well, we'll see. So you can sound.
You
off
better be sending your apologies
for all you triggered Aussies. You may now say so in the comments, but it's of no matter because we're just reaching all around the world today. So we're bringing our next guest in clear from Ireland for the magic of the interwebs in with you today in our studio. That's also
they're tubes. Come on,
the tubulars. Yeah. So it's all good. But so Rory is one of those guys that just does a lot of things all at once, and we're going to figure out just exactly how this even works. But he's a Citrix CTA at one point, Citrix CTP, Microsoft MVP, VMware vExpert, EUC champion, EUC insider. That's just scratching the surface, y'all. He's very well known for his work in the IT world, just in general. Application packaging and things like that has become a real passion of his. I've actually worked alongside of him in healthcare IT, so we've spent some time with that. Most well known for the 5 Bytes podcast, bringing you the week's news and events. And Trent says, yes, got Rory in the house all the way over from Ireland. So I'm going to hear a lot about this back and forth between the U.S. and Ireland. So let's welcome on.
Well, and you got Canada up there too.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, you talked about Australia. I'm about halfway between the U.S. and Australia.
Yeah,
there you go.
We're spanning the gap today. We're spanning the gap.
Yeah.
Rory, how the heck are you?
I'm fantastic. No complaints,
Awesome.
Really. Yeah.
Well,
Nice.
why don't you not only introduce yourself, but tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from originally, and we'll kind of get into the story of Rory.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. So originally I was actually born in the U.S., but my family moved to Ireland when I was still a baby. So really, I consider myself Irish. I lived here for the first 27 years of my life. And then I relocated and moved to the U.S. because I was like, I'm a U.S. citizen. I would regret it if I don't give it a try. And frankly, work opportunities are better in the U.S. than this small little place in the west of Ireland that I live in. So that was a big contributor too. But yeah, I got my start in IT, just working in the west of Ireland in Galway with some great colleagues in HP or HP, depending on where you're from.
Yeah.
Application packaging, you touched on that. That's
So-
an area of expertise, but that's becoming, you can't really just do application packaging anymore. You kind of have to have a wider spectrum of skills. So I've been broadening my skill set over the last few years too.
Gotcha. Well, let's back up a little bit. So let's how in the world did IT become your thing? Is this something like a childhood thing that just became where you are, or how did you land in information technology in general?
Yeah, it wasn't really a childhood thing. Like when my parents bought the house that I grew up in, the guy who was the original owner actually had like a computer lab within the house. So my dad got him to throw in a computer when we bought the house. So that's kind of my initial exposure. Also, it's funny talking to some younger guys, but when my uncle was moving away to college from Galway to Dublin, because TVs were expensive and you wouldn't have like more than one in a house. And if you're young, you didn't even have one at the time. Right. So he had like an Atari and I think a Commodore, and he couldn't take them with him because he didn't have a TV. So he gave them to us. So that was also a little bit of exposure there too. But really, other than gaming and just general browsing, I didn't really have a passion from a very young age. I actually wanted to do journalism. But one of my dad's friends was a journalist at the time. He's like, look, it's very hard to break into journalism. You have to be famous, or you have to have like this other career that you've specialized in first in order to break into the journalism side. So he's like, it's not that realistic. You should probably try to do something that's a little more practical. So it's like, well, what's practical in Ireland? You know, let's see, we have a boatload of IT companies over here, US multinationals. So IT seemed like a pretty good choice. Now, luckily, I was terrible in school, just all throughout school. I did go to college because Ireland makes it very accessible to go to college. I think it's one of the reasons why it is so popular for these large IT companies. We're constantly just pumping out pretty high-skilled workers because college is pretty accessible. But I went to college, and I much preferred my time in college than I did the rest of my school, and I actually did pretty well relative to all my previous schooling. So I actually developed the passion more so in college.
Right on.
Nice.
Right on. So was it actual degree in like information technology, or what was the actual degree?
Yeah, so I started off my first 2 years, I was just doing programming, straight programming. I opted to try and switch it around in the third year to be more enterprise business focused. So my end degree was IT with business administration, I think. Yeah, so it was part programming, but also part the business application, networking, that sort of thing.
It's funny because when you do people mention like, you know, your degrees or, you know, their degree, like my degree, what does it really mean? I mean, computer information systems is what I graduated, you know, my bachelor's. How is that any, you know, I mean, I don't know what that makes that different than business administration, because it sounds like a lot of it is alike. So it's like, all right, just throw words on a paper and you got the bachelor's. That's all that matters, right?
First controversial opinion of the podcast, but I also find, like you're saying, putting it into that bucket, universities and colleges maybe aren't the best at figuring out, you know, what to title their courses. And also just, you know, if someone's been a lecturer for more than a few years, it's very hard for them to stay with their finger on the pulse of what's going on outside of college. Like I found that a lot of my lecturers, they'd be just going crazy during the summer trying to learn as much as they could. So like, I think when I first started college, or maybe the second year, is when .NET came out. So the lecturers, they knew C++, they knew Java and all that, like really strong. Then they had to ramp up in this brand new programming language. And you're learning from someone who only has like 3 months of experience. So IT
Yeah.
is so quickly changing. I don't know if maybe universities and colleges are the best place to learn the technology side. You learn a lot of other really useful things from college, though, so it's not a complete
Sure.
loss. And you get to party. So,
Well, I mean, there's that.
oh yeah,
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I didn't finish my degree until I was over 30, because I was making more money and getting more experience just working the real world. After a few years of college, it was like, why am I building this debt and, and everything in the US that, I can make money. I can make good money. So absolutely. Yeah. And it's just it. I mean, accounting and things like that, yes, they change, but not at the pace of technology and whatnot. So,
Well, I mean,
I agree.
and I guess I could get on a soapbox about this a little bit as far as like teaching theory instead of teaching, application. Sounds weird. I'm talking about applications, talking about application, but the idea is that if you don't have a foundation of why you do things and that sort of thing, then really you're just learning something that's going to be obsolete in a matter of months. So, kind of interesting to see if our education system will catch up with any of that. But I think we're all too old to know whether that's happening currently or not.
Does Rory know App V? Very insightful question, Trent.
You're jumping the gun quite a bit here. I mean, come on. We're still in the dark ages. We're not even to that point of the story yet. But so out of college, like first jobs, is there standout things that kind of stood out in the journey here? What brought you to where you are now? Are there like key things that you notice about jobs you had or things like that you didn't like or did like that kind of pointed that out along the way?
Yeah, well, my first job was working with HP. I was there for, I think, just over 5 years before I moved to the US. And that was very focused on application packaging. So we were providing application packaging services to large investment banks, to like large distilleries, to just these huge enterprise organizations, thousands upon thousands of applications. So that was a really great learning experience. And actually, in my little leaving email when I was moving to the US, I said, I learned more in my first few months in that job than I did in my 4 years of college. Like, it's
Right.
incredible what you can learn from seasoned professionals, especially as well. I think maybe it could be underappreciated, but when you're focused on the application side of things, you tend to learn like the real nitty gritty of the Windows OS as well. So it's quite overwhelming when you first start doing it.
Right. Yeah, indeed. So tell us more about the move to the US.
Sure. Yeah, like I said, I was a US citizen. I felt like I would regret it if I didn't at least try. And I had a few different options. It was kind of on the fly a little bit, the timing wise. I was like, screw this, something happened. I was like, I'm getting out now. So I started applying for jobs, and because the application packaging space is so specialized, a lot of people struggle to fill those spots. Like, they were just left open for months or years on end.
Right.
So I started applying, and I started getting like interviews very quickly, like New York, Chicago, Connecticut, and I had one in Arizona, and I got a few different offers, and I was like, out of these places, where should I try? And I was like, well, Arizona seems like the most different to Ireland. So if I'm going to try somewhere, I should really go for somewhere that's completely different. And that's what I did.
Right on.
And the first job I had there, I was just like working as a contractor, setting up AppV for an insurance company. I think like my second week there, after having moved, like sold my car back in Ireland, given away most of my stuff and just brought 2 bags with me, moved to this strange place. Like my second week there, someone said, "Oh, you're like helping us with AppV, so that's going to help us with our application compatibility, right, for the Windows 7?" Like, oh no, they brought me over and they have no idea what AppV is, but it worked out.
Yeah.
I'll say probably at that time, a lot of people didn't have a clue as to what AppV was. They just oh, Microsoft said we should be doing this. So,
Well, it didn't help that a lot of vendors and even Microsoft themselves were touting it as the way to get to Windows 7. Yeah,
it
not
was
that
the way
that's
to do everything.
happened in the industry before. Gosh,
Well, actually, what's funny is I was when I was working with HP, we were partners with Microsoft, so they had this like Windows 7 Launchpad and MDOP Launchpad program, and I actually got sent from Ireland over to Los Angeles and to a few different places in the U.S. because they didn't have people who had the expertise
Yeah.
in the U.S. So I actually got to work with a few companies and get a little exposure to the U.S. that way as well.
Wow,
Nice.
crazy times. So
I
and now,
do
so
like
you
that though.
were-
The exact you wanted the opposite of Ireland, so you picked not only Arizona. I mean, because Arizona has a wide variety of environment biomes, whatever. But Phoenix, I mean, that is definitely the opposite right there.
Yeah, that which is funny. Like before moving there, I'd been to the Grand Canyon, but it was like a day tour from Las Vegas. So I hadn't been to Phoenix. I hadn't been to the area at all. And I didn't know like the Grand Canyon. It's pretty high north. I was feeling good in that air. I was feeling good with the temperature, and I'd researched. I think it was like on about.com or something like that. But I researched like Phoenix, like what you should know. And there's a lady who said the weather's only really like very hot for 2 months of the year, and it's nothing compared to living on the East Coast where you might have like 2-3 months of like ice and snow and all that. And then I moved, I think it was like February, and by March it was just like sweat pouring off me. My skin is peeling off. It's so hot. I think that year there was a beer festival or something in Scottsdale, and people who had actually like lived in Arizona started getting like taken away because they were getting sunstroke because it just was abnormally hot for that time of year. I was like, and that's the year I moved there. I think it was hot straight through November. It was awful.
That's crazy. I think I've been to that festival actually.
Yeah, they got a really good tequila
Now that
festival
I'm
too.
thinking about it, yeah.
Ooh, oh, now see, I didn't know that.
Uh,
I'm going to Phoenix, baby. I love tequila.
And Revenge of the Fifth. Anyway, yeah, that was earlier. So anyway, so were you married at this point when you moved, or was it just you? Okay.
No, yeah, I wasn't married. I met my wife in Phoenix actually, and now she's moved to Ireland with me. So she's doing the inverse of what I did.
He's the expat. Yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy. All right.
So are you dual citizenship then, or yeah?
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah, I'm dual citizen. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's got its benefits.
Yeah, well, yeah, obviously. Yeah. So but yeah, cool. So so I'm very curious about the podcast. Like what exactly, I mean, I can already see, that, if I'm interested in journalism. And so I'm sure that probably played into, even if it's just subconsciously into the podcast. But how did we get to application packaging to the podcast?
Actually, it's funny because my very first job is kind of what influenced me. So there was a guy working there at the time, and he imparted the wisdom to myself and one of my colleagues, another graduate coming into HP at the time. He said, "Technology moves very fast. Keep reading, keep learning, keep your skills up." So from that point, I just kept consuming whatever was out there, like
Yeah.
blogs or like official proper IT publications where there's selling ads and they're full-time professionals, unlike us bloggers. But yeah, I was just consuming that all the time. And then funny, when I had kids, I was like, I don't think I'm going to have as much time for doing these like intensive 5-part blog post series and how-to guides and all that anymore. So I was like, a podcast might be a way to more quickly just put something out there and contribute some way. But it turns out podcasting is hard. It takes a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's more than just jumping in front of a mic, recording what you want, and sending it out to the casters. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we should get some history here. When did you actually start the podcast?
I think it's about 3.5 years ago. I actually think the first episode I did was from a place called Pyong Na in Thailand, and the internet was terrible. So I had to keep the episodes like really short to make sure they were able to upload.
I mean, that's not a bad thing, right?
Yeah, and it's kind of the idea of the name behind the podcast as well. Like 5 Bytes, pretty small, easy to consume. I tend to keep them below 30 minutes typically, and it's almost all just going through the week's enterprise IT news. I throw in some like community contributions. If anyone has a webinar that they'd like me to mention, I know for myself, I get all these emails of like, oh, webinar. I tend to just ignore them. So instead, if you're listening to something and there's a really interesting webinar and I just explain it to you in a minute, maybe that would pique your interest. So if people have webinars they want me to promote, I don't charge. Just let me know. If you've got a job, particularly if it's a remote work job now, because they seem like they're in particular demand from actual workers, and I'd rather give something to benefit the actual users and the community and the admins. I promote that for free. Just scripts, tricks, and tips, anything that the community contributes. I tend to keep an eye on those and share those as well each week.
Cool. So, I mean, getting a little bit in the mechanics, like how did you land on, I mean, obviously keeping it short, but how did you kind of land on the whole, just 5 things?
Oh, well, actually, I didn't even land on it. I was going for like bite-sized. That was going to be like bite-sized DUC podcast or something like that. And then my wife, I guess she feigned that she was listening to me. And the next day she called it 5 Bytes. And I was like, oh, that actually sounds pretty good. I like that better. That's why I went with it.
Inspiration strikes in the weirdest, strange ways. Yeah.
So what because you were doing blogs, like you said, multi-part blogs about tech things, your experiences, things like that. What made you decide to go from blogging that to kind of the weekly news summary, what's been going on? Because that is different than what you had been doing.
Yeah, and honestly, it was just kind of like personal interest. So, I don't really have goals in my career or whatever. I just kind of go with the flow, whatever I'm kind of feeling like at the time. And I was just like, oh, I'm reading all this stuff. There's a lot of people who are very busy in their lives and they probably don't have the time to read. There's people working in very reactive environments that don't give them any free time. So this is a way to help them, and actually DJ and I were talking last week, but the numbers have actually dropped for the show in the last year because people used to listen to it when they're commuting to and from work. But now since people aren't commuting anymore, they're less inclined to like listen to a podcast or whatever. So
yeah,
I don't mind though. It's all good.
Yeah, it's good for me because I like to catch up. You make it easy to catch up on stuff that I know I've met, and I bet it sounds like it's good for you because, like you said, before you have kids, you have no idea how those kids impact your life and make it harder to do things that you just are used to doing. So it sounds like it helped, it allows you to keep up with the technology, but also be productive on, doing a podcast and keeping up on things and keeping other people, just keeping your name out there, things like that. So yeah, that's great. I love it. Like I said, for me, it's a matter of, I just don't have time to scour everywhere anymore. And, so it's great to be able to get, like you said, just a bite-sized news feed.
Yeah, yeah, and it also oddly alleviates some of my guilt as well because I would have tried to consume all this information in the past, but now that I'm actually regurgitating it out on a podcast, I don't feel as guilty taking that time away from like family time as well because it's benefiting other people
Yeah.
and also it benefits me as well. And actually, what I found is scripting out the episodes and then like speaking it and then editing it. I'm actually finding I'm retaining this information a lot better than I had in the past as well. So it's actually pretty cool.
Nice.
We actually went there. Like a question I was going to ask is kind of, telling people about your workflow. Because I don't know. We should just take a moment and just assume that people don't know how like a podcast works or things like this. And somebody listening or watching this might be kind of interested in that. So, I mean, walk us through a little bit about how your podcast works from a mechanical standpoint, like from the like gathering things, making a script, things like that, to actually recording. Let's walk us through a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, actually, my number one tool recommendation just for anyone in enterprise IT is Twitter. It's
Mm.
awesome. It's just a constant timeline of people sharing cool things and cool articles and information. So Twitter is one of my sources. I also have kind of built up over the years what I'd consider my more reliable sources. I trust the information that they'd have. So I'd kind of recheck and I find something on this maybe publication that I don't know that well. I might go to like a ZDNet or an Ars Technica or one of those sites and
Yeah.
confirm. Yeah, so I'd find all that information. I would compile it into a list. Sometimes I'll have the time during the week to read it. Sometimes I won't, so I'll just take the link and park it. A lot of times now I'm kind of busy again, so I just take in the link, parking it, and then at night I'll come back and I'll read through everything. I'll try to break it down in some partly into my own words. A lot of times I want to do like direct quotes if it's a statement from Satya Nadella or a CEO of some other company or whatever. I want to get it right, so I'll say that kind of verbatim. Um, yeah, I just compile out this script. It takes about 3 hours or so each week, and then I got to record the audio, which typically takes about 30 to 40 minutes.
Mhm.
Then the editing, which really sucks because I stutter and stammer, and sometimes I'll get lazy with the scripting if it's like 1 a.m. and I'm like, oh, I got to get this done. Then I have to read it the next day, and I forget what I wrote, and I was like, oh god, let's okay, pause it there. Let's do it again, and then I just have to cut it all out. So editing can take an hour easy, even if it's only like a 20, 30-minute episode. And
Yeah.
then the uploading and the sharing it out and all that takes another about an hour as well. So it's quite the time drain, unfortunately.
Yeah. Undertaking.
Mhm.
Now, are you finding you're getting better at it as you're going along?
No, no, not at all. I've still got the same problems I've had from day one. The beginning of the show and the end of the show, I could do that in my sleep.
Mhm.
Just because all the content in the middle constantly changes.
Mhm.
No, I'm not getting quicker. I'm not getting better at it. It's just, I don't think it's ever going to change. It's always going to be hard.
Well, that's the thing when you're doing like current events things. It's always going to be a challenge in that regards. It's
Yeah.
pretty much you got to do it, and there's no shortcuts. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I said, though, I get the benefit out of myself. Just I retain the information. I go into like meetings or whatever, and oh, hey, by the way, this comes up, or I just read this, so
Yeah.
that might influence our direction on what we're talking about. So it's kind of cool.
So Renee actually already asked the question I was going to ask, and that's what tools are you using to do all of your podcasts? I know you're doing more with like YouTube these days as well. So what tools are you using to do all this?
Yeah, big respect, Camtasia. I do a
Yeah.
lot in Camtasia. Um,
Yeah, we'll
yeah,
put a link in the description for people. We'll make that happen after the show today.
yeah. So I use Camtasia. I really love the timeline. Like I've tried Audacity. It feels pretty dated now. Camtasia, because you could separate out the audio track and the video track.
Mm-hmm.
You could just export the audio by itself. So if you just edit the audio, export the audio, you can upload that onto whatever your primary source is. For me, it's SoundCloud. So SoundCloud is the main RSS feed for the podcast. So like if you've never done a podcast, if anyone's listening before or listening to this and never done one themselves, like you could take the single audio file, upload it to one source with the RSS feed, and then you just have accounts set up within like the different podcast platforms, some of them, like the big ones, like maybe Spotify or whatever. And when you publish a new episode, that checks in at intervals against the RSS feed, and the new episode shows up on that platform. So you're not like going into each one uploading it. Pretty good from that standpoint. Then there's these aggregator apps as well that have become pretty popular, like I think like Pocket Cast and those. I think they're just feeding automatically out off some source. I don't even really understand it.
Right.
Yeah, it's not that difficult, that part of it. Like publishing a podcast, super easy, which is really great because it's this kind of punk rock thing. Like anyone can do it. Like if you feel like doing a podcast, fire ahead by all means. Yeah, it's not difficult. It's time consuming. That's about it.
It is. But I'm curious, what kind of things have you found? Because I always want people to understand that when you start doing things that are, for the community, that there's benefits outside of what people might think. So what kind of things have happened in your life or kind of become unlocked by your efforts in doing all this?
So I've been doing the blogging for a long time anyway, and that was really great because you do get a little bit of notice as well. Like you become like an MVP, you get recognition within the community, you get opportunities to speak at conferences, which you can basically build your own brand by putting out content. Which, by the way, I've said it on Twitter as well, especially in the EUC space. It seems like a lot of the people who had been very active in blogging, like in the past, a lot of them are working directly for vendors now. So maybe they're not able to blog as much on their personal blogs anymore. Or some have just kind of stopped. They've just gotten too busy. I think it's a really great opportunity for anyone who's listening to this. And hey, doing a podcast, it's not that difficult. It's time consuming, but anyone can do it. You could do it. Blogging, setting up a site, especially nowadays when I started,
Crazy.
it sucked. It was terrible. But like WordPress and Joomla and a few different apps or platforms are pretty simple now. You can get started.
Yeah.
And you might feel like you don't have anything worth sharing or whatever, but you do. I mean, even if someone else has blogged about the same thing, your insight and what you experienced setting it up is going to show value to other people as well. So with that kind of lack of blogs, like there's some out there, there's still people who are active, but there's not as many as there was. There's an opportunity for people who aren't doing it currently to maybe step in and start doing it themselves. So I'd encourage it. The greater the community.
If anybody has any doubts on this, Rory would know. He's making it his life to kind of aggregate this, and so I've been noticing the same thing, that there's been a drop in the amount of material that's being published these days. Even though there's been an increase in the amount, like you said, especially in the EUC space, there's been an increase of challenges. There's been a decrease of content, which at first I attributed to everybody's just busy taking care of business, but I've come to realize the same thing. It's just, no, actually a lot of people are either not able to. On a episode we're going to try and put together sometime soon, we're going to start talking more about the kind of legal things that are coming up with companies now, and not wanting people to blog and things like that, and owning intellectual property and all this kind of stuff. That's just kind of a small nightmare, but it's happening, so it's actually having the unfortunate effect of shutting down a lot of voices that you can be the one to say things in a different way, and it might get attention where others don't. We should never assume that just because Jeff puts out a blog post that that's now covered, and nobody should ever say anything about that because Jeff said it. The problem is Google doesn't work like that. And so it's like, you always want to get more information out there, not less. So yeah, thank you for saying that.
Oh, and I think
Yeah,
with the
no.
decrease of bloggers too, that means that there's less information being pushed out.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's you may very well have the blog to cover certain problems that, other people just haven't taken the time to either, blog about or just haven't figured out yet.
Yeah, actually, case in point, I was just thinking, the most recent application that I packaged, I was telling Trenton about this today, actually. It's a pretty critical healthcare application, does a very important job, and it's multi-user supported, which I probably should have, when I read that, think, oh, why are they highlighting it like that? So the problem is the vendor didn't have anyone who actually knew Citrix, or at least the guy I was working with said, well, I'm actually the person who knows it the best in the company, but he didn't seem to actually really know it that well. 2 weeks later, just going back and forth, like, how does this app work? Like, you gave me your documentation. You've given me 3 different documents. I still have no idea how this app works. So he sends me like an email with scripts that one of their customers who uses in Citrix was using, launch scripts. I was like, oh no, okay, whatever, I'll try it. Tried the launch scripts, it still doesn't work. Like,
Right.
gave me the exact scripts and it still didn't work. So I was like, what is going on with this? And then he sends me a video that someone had created, and the video didn't explain how to install it or how to set it up. But while I was watching it, the person goes, okay, so I've launched the application, and now I launched the application with this parameter, and see, it launches twice. I was like, hold on. So does that mean for it to work with multi-user, you first have to launch it at least once on the machine without any parameters, and then every subsequent launch has to use a specific parameter to be multi-user? And sure enough, that's exactly what it was. And the person's script didn't do that, so the vendor didn't have information on that. They didn't have a specialist. So that's probably one that's a key candidate to be blogged about, because I'm sure there's going to be other people who are wondering the same thing and wasting time.
Honestly, it's a pain point I'm hearing more and more of, especially internally, where documentation is just not happening. Something that I think, well, personally, I'm seeing a lot of it happen just because of the, what we've dealt with in the last year, the increase in work from home, and kind of the increases in agility have caused a decrease in practical usable documentation, that sort of thing. So, I mean, that's why I took some time and wrote about it. But it's one of those frustrating things where it's just like, then you have the problem of, companies not necessarily giving employees the time to document it internally. So they're having to go find blog posts and things like that every single time. It's kind of, it seems like it's never going to end. It's like,
I
20
totally
years.
agree with that.
Yeah. Not to get
Yeah,
all.
they don't give them enough time, and you won't find documentation. And then, that person leaves, and the company is hosed, for that particular area.
Yeah. Renee bring up some interesting point here. Is like, I think a lot of activity and time has shifted towards Slack. Maybe that's another reason for decreasing blog content. And that's very possible.
It's very possible. The problem with that is Slack in and of itself is a closed community.
Mm-hmm.
So if you blog, it's on the internet, it's going to be grabbed by the search engines, all that good stuff. Slack, you have to be part of that Slack workspace to be able to get that information.
Yeah.
External people can now be members, as I covered on the 5 Bytes podcast. You can do the DM Connect thing, but you have to be invited in. So it's
you need to be part of that workspace. It's not crawled by the engines because it's not public.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of really great Slack workspaces out there, but I find it really overwhelming. Like, some of them are just constantly going, just all day, ping, 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 ping.
Yeah.
It's impossible. You just miss so much in there.
Yeah. And they may have a million channels inside of them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the other good point Trent brings up right there. If you want to throw that up, Yeah, Slack only the free, which is what probably most people are using for community type projects. It only holds so much information before it's gone.
That's true.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a great point. And there are some things you can do with automation and whatnot to deal with that.
To
But
alleviate some of that, but it's still not as good as a blog because like Rory's saying, I mean, you sometimes you get so many pings in, and even trying to find, somebody says, I have this problem. Has anyone seen it before? Or can you help me troubleshoot it? You could have this long thread where the answer is somewhere in the middle. But people keep commenting and it's impossible to find the solution. I mean, that's forums today, and yesterday, and, it's the same type of thing. So, that's the great thing about a blog is where a person or multiple people are laying it all out there. And this is the solution. We went through all this to find this and that fixed it.
yeah,
And actually,
it's not ranting against Slack because I love Slack, but for a public information that you're trying to distribute, that's not a good place for that information.
Yeah.
And actually, on kind of related, but a little bit of an aside, something that I really used to like what you guys did at Unidesk. Pretty much every version of the product that was launched, there were these long videos that Ron Oglesby was recording every time going through the setup. It was like you didn't have any real questions after watching them because he explained absolutely everything. It wasn't just oh, you do this, then you click next, then you click next. Yeah. Like if there's multiple options, he was explaining exactly what each option is. There's actual context. It was awesome.
Yeah, that's exactly kind of what I was, going to say next too. Is like, take food bloggers. I mean, we kind of get frustrated at food blogs these days because it's like all I want is a recipe, but Google wants a story, and so you get this story. But some of those can get kind of interesting. It's just like you're learning more about like that whole experience. Well, when it comes to documentation specifically, and this is true of blog posts as well, if you just start spewing out, here's how to do all this, that's really not going to get any attention, and it's not going to be long enough usually for Google, for example. But if you get the story of why it's important, you get like, here's the challenge, here's what we needed to do, and here's how we did it. Well, that's a great story. That's a hero's journey kind of a thing. It's like, and that's what people really need more of, not only in the blog space, but also internally in their own IT departments. They need the story, because the reality is people aren't sticking around at their jobs very long these days. They're on to other things pretty rapidly. And so if that is like tribal knowledge where somebody just, has that kind of locked into their headspace, then yeah, it's just, I don't want to say it's worthless, but if you no longer have access to that employee because they're working somewhere else now, well then, yeah, it kind of is worthless. And so companies really should be encouraging like internal blogging, external blogging, that sort of thing, a lot more than they currently do, in my opinion.
They should be encouraging internal retention is what they should be.
Yeah, just
pushing, not just letting somebody go and, or you know what I mean? It's a twofold problem, right? I mean, the reason they're leaving is, who knows why, but a lot of times it's just overworked, underpaid, greener pastures over here, hopefully. There's a lot that can be done from an employer standpoint, to make it a better experience. I mean, doing more with less sounds great, but when your employees are harried and just, it's a problem. It's a problem.
So I'm sitting here like, gosh, I was, what was I, saying about that or something like that? And it's like funny how the mind of old guy brain starts working. And I'm like, oh yeah, I wrote I was writing about that in the book. It's chapter 9. It's all about the reason to do documentation and things like that, and just kind of the various ways to go about that. So that's really kind of funny that I just was thinking about that. I was like, just key things like, so let me just say, like, what was the risk that you're addressing? What's the resources that were required to make it happen? What's the next things you need to consider, that sort of thing. These are just easy enough to write down. It's just that people aren't doing it. And it's just like a paragraph is better than no paragraph at all. And so it's just like pushing people to just freaking go don't have to write a novel. Just write something to.
No, but I think part of it is just, when you're on the inside of an organization and, you're short-staffed as it is. I mean, even writing a paragraph, in the, is difficult to do because you just solved one fire. Oh, there's another 5 over there that need to be put out. And, sometimes it's just hard to take that time. And sometimes it is hard to take the time. Now, I do agree that if you need to take the time, because I mean, I know from myself, I will forget the solution 5 hours later, whatever it was, because, hey, I don't have time to think and get it into long-term memory. I have enough to fix it and try to move on to the next thing. So, I have to put things down. That's the only way I'm going to remember, especially when I am in those situations.
Yeah. Well, Trent just brought up something interesting. What about SharePoint? A lot of companies have SharePoint, it has an internal blogging functionality. I've seen a whopping one company that I've done consulting work with have a policy of, before you leave for the day, tell the story of your day. Just lessons learned, whatever, and the way they said it is like, look, we're paying you for a half hour of your time. Just for a half hour, write down what you did today. And it's not to be used for anything else other than telling the story. And that place had really good internal documentation, because that's searchable, right? So you can see, okay, I had this problem. So you search for the problem and boom, there's somebody's, basically a blog with the solution. So it doesn't have to be complicated. But the thing about that is that can be formulated into content that you can use elsewhere. Obviously be careful about that. Don't just assume you can just because you had that experience. You obviously,
and that's coming from experience, right, DJ?
What's that?
Which episode was that? The experience that you had?
Yeah, episode 3, where we talk about me being fired for exactly what we're talking about right now. So don't get.
I think what you nailed part of that, I think, right on the head, is that the company gave them a half hour to do that.
Right. Yeah.
And that's very rarely found.
Exactly. It's like, well, we mentioned early on, like the whole problem with everybody being reactive instead of proactive. That's a very reactive stance, or a very proactive stance of saying, we know we're going to have problems in the future. This might happen again. Or sometimes it's even like, how can we learn how to be more effective? And so that kind of journaling aspect of things is powerful. I mean, it really does change people's work days. It's something that I do. I mean, I keep this by my desk at all times. This is like the story of my day, so it's incredibly powerful. So we can take that to a lot of different things and, kind of benefit, but that's like, it makes it easier once you're in the practice of that to start producing other content as well. So that's kind of another thing that I guess people can know is that, practice makes, I don't want to say practice makes perfect, because, obviously, then we come across Rory, who can't seem to figure out how to make his podcast easier.
Well, I was going to say what's funny is, like one of my first IT jobs, they had a internal knowledge base and they had this award system. So if you got 9 KBs published,
yeah,
like get rewarded for it. It was a really great idea, and it was really intense though, because you needed to have it peer reviewed by at least 2 people.
Yeah.
And what's funny is I put together these 9 articles, put them into the KB. I was waiting for approval, and they announced that they were decommissioning and they shut it down. And that's how my blog started. I just took those and put them on a blog.
Well, that's perfect. All right, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
All worked out.
It all worked out in the end. But yeah, we should obviously say that, make sure you Well, a couple things I'll say about this just really quick. If you are interested in starting a blog and you want to blog about your experiences, just be very careful not to call out any kind of information about the systems you're working on, the name of your employer and things like that without any kind of permission to do so. That's actually really important. But also keep in mind that when you do that, you may not retain ownership of that. That might be something that your company actually has the ability to own. And so if you're interested in doing things like monetizing your blog with ads and things like that, just be a little cautious about that kind of thing. But these are easy things to get around. Easy enough to get, written permission to do things like that. Just make sure you do these equally easy things to make this happen. But
I think the other thing about documentation too, that even if you're not able to post it somewhere, put it somewhere, even if you just write it down so you remember and you have that information later on, it's invaluable. Like I said, for me, going back and thinking back, a length of time, like, I know I've seen this issue, but what was the solution? No, if you write that stuff down or, notepad it, word, whatever, that's invaluable stuff to have, even just for your own personal good.
Yeah, I won't say his name, but I was talking to one of the CTAs in California a while ago, and we were laughing about the fact that, sometimes we'll Google for a solution. It's like, oh man, I remember this. What was it? Google and my own website comes up.
Yeah, it's happened to me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, with the blogging and just with the documentation, like you were saying, Jeff, I've had the intention of posting blogs, like a how-to blog on something I'm working on. And then I'm like, oh, there's too many screenshots. This is going to take forever. I'm not going to do that. And I'll just keep the document for myself, like setting up VMware Horizon from scratch, setting up the host with ESXi, putting in vCenter, setting up VMware Horizon. I had all that documented. I think Webster had been blogging about that like a year or so ago. I was like, good for you, Webster, because I didn't have what it took to get that posted in a blog. It was just too much for me.
Yeah. And for me, I'm a digital hoarder. I really am. I mean, I've got email dumps that go back, well, over a decade now, just because there was information and I hate giving them up. And like you bring up Unidesk, I'll have somebody reach out occasionally for a tool or something, hey, do you still have this? We're still doing this. And yeah, I think I might. Let me unpack my zip and see what's in there. And sure enough, things like that. So it's weird, but that stuff does come in handy occasionally, even if it's just goodwill, being able to help somebody out.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's up for the future, Rory? What's next with your new plan?
Plan. I don't know what I'm doing tomorrow, but
I was going to say he did say earlier that he has no. You can't ask him what his 5-year goals are.
Well, I didn't ask that.
It's just the dumbest question.
This is a job interview. I'm just curious if you have things that you're working towards or you're very interested in pursuing, that sort of thing.
Yeah, kind of in like the immediate future. I'm trying to make more time to do blogging as well because I kind of miss doing that and miss doing some of the research that's required for it. So like particular areas of interest at the moment, I've noticed that there's not that much content out there about Numescent cloud paging. So that's something that I've been posting more about. I'm like, why isn't there information about this? Like it can do pretty much every application. Like I actually, from the blogging about it and just from researching for the application virtualization Smackdown over the years, I've gotten to know people who work for customers of Numescent cloud paging. So I actually got on a call with three guys about 4 weeks ago, and we were just like talking about it. And one of the fellows, Jürgen in Norway, what's up, Jürgen? He's like, hey, we should really get like a user group together. It's like, it's really hard to find information on the product. There's plenty of people who have a lot of information about it. So that's something we're working on in the future. We're going to get a cloud paging user group together.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm going to post whatever other content I've got in my drafts on that. Something I've been having an interest in is the RPA stuff. So like the robotic process automation. I've been doing some content creation around Automate. I want to try and do more of that on my blog as well. Maybe the Microsoft Windows Power Automate for Windows. Yeah. It's free on Windows 10 now. It's a little limited in what you can do with it, but I think cool. It gives a really good taste of what RPA is about, at least.
Yeah, that's not that well. Yeah, I can see how that sounds like a lot of challenges. It's gonna take some time, but that's cool about the cloud paging user group, things like that. That's a really good idea.
And you mentioned Automate, right? That's what I heard in there.
You did.
Yeah, Automate. Yeah, that one I spent a lot of time with.
Yeah, that's a really great product as well. Easy, make things easy.
Yep. Yeah, super easy. Yeah, it's kind of like I said, I did programming in college. I've tried to do a lot of scripting, and actually that's partially a topic of not being able to share blogs and stuff like that. But like a lot of tools that I would have created over the years are things that I could not put out into the community. So I've been trying to recently claw back and rejig some of my tools of the past, genericize them, and share them out as well. So that's something I'm actively working on at the moment as well, is filling up my GitHub repo with some useful community tools.
Nice.
Very cool. That's a lot.
Yeah, well, the trick for that is I went independent this year. So I have been working full time in the healthcare IT job that you know about, DJ. Mm-hmm. So this year I've gone independent. I'm doing part of the time contracting in the healthcare system. I'm doing 2 days a week at the moment, working with ControlUp or on their product marketing team, which allows me to do some like content creation and stuff like that. And then my Fridays, that's really awesome because it's a floating day, and that gives me some time to research for doing the RPA blog posts that I'm interested in, the cloud paging stuff, just anything I could think of. And sometimes it's my overflow day if I haven't been able to get to the podcast yet as well. So that has been helping improve my work life in general and keep up on doing so many things.
Yeah, that's one of the things about being independent. It's really kind of great is to be able to do that. I mean, obviously there's ups and downs to going independent, but it's nice to be able to dive into these kind of things and really not be hindered. That the ability to say no is probably the one thing about being independent that's the strongest thing I would say there.
Yeah, and I'm very lucky, and I realize I'm in a very privileged position. I think everyone in end user computing, particularly in the last year, is very privileged because so many people have lost their livelihoods, and you just look at the pandemic where it's raging in some parts. Like I consider myself very lucky. I get to stay at home, work from home, still make a good living, and it's giving me more time actually to do stuff like the blogging and the podcasting and stuff like that. So very, very fortunate.
Yeah. I mean, it's well, yeah, I can speak to that too. Yeah, it's like, it's amazing what you can do. But at the same time, yeah, it's very much, I remember blogging about this early on in the process. And, back when we was first going into lockdown, it's like, okay, this is an opportunity, y'all. This is what we were training for. This is our moment. Go. Yeah. You got your marching orders. Now do it. We've been waiting for, not for something like this, but we've been trained without realizing, this is exactly the kind of thing that,
Rory, do you get the feeling that DJ might have had something to do with the start of the pandemic?
It's a searchable. Conspiracy theories.
Hey, don't get me started, man. I'll put my tinfoil hat back on, I swear. Actually, I have my Mandalorian helmet that has the tinfoil inside, so not only can I look cool, but people won't know that I have the tinfoil going. Because walking around with the Mandalorian helmet is cool. I didn't want to come out straight out and say that DJ started the pandemic, Trent, but I totally agree now. I think he indicted himself.
It's on the internet now, so it must be true.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I saw it on Facebook. So
Saying things like that could get me fired. Oh, wait.
no, the one thing that I have found, I mean, mainly working from home, but it goes with being independent, is that I've been able to spend more time with my family, going to kid events, obviously before the pandemic. But because you can set your own, for the most part, you can set your own schedule. And if you want to go to a kid's soccer game or whatever, you can set aside that time and go and do it. And those are things that when you're working in an office, is a lot harder to do.
That's very true.
Oh, we're going to get started. Did you see was it the CEO of WeWork? And what he was saying about people who don't want to go back to the office are those who are like the least engaged workers.
Oh, good Lord. Well, did you see what was it Chase or JP Morgan Chase that said we're going to bring everybody back in, and on their internal message boards, like a lot of people were complaining, and then they shut down the message board. They locked it. It's like, okay.
That's a little conspiracy that I've been getting into, and I've been reading those or talking about those on the podcast as well. It's like, banks of all the businesses, I think they've got a bit of a vested interest in people returning to the office, because a lot of their holdings would be real estate, and a lot of businesses as well do business with them and rely on people like footfall for people commuting to work. So that's my theory.
Well,
I saw something, a headline or something about some CEO or something said like the commute is good. It's like, no.
Yeah.
It gives you a chance in to Chicago or a big city. And
we mentioned earlier, podcasts and things like that on a commute. That's good, but gosh, it's not like that's a reason.
You look at big cities. I mean, God, look at California. You spend 2 hours in a car to go 5 miles. I'm sorry. What are you getting done? I mean,
well, I've got my little kind of America story as well about commuting. So I was commuting on the I-10 in Phoenix when they had the serial shooter who was shooting at cars along the I-10 in Phoenix.
Yeah.
So it was so surreal. Like, you're just sitting in traffic, and there's like an overpass, and looking at like the column. It's like, is he there? Is he there? And oh my God, I'm a sitting duck in traffic here. And it was just like, especially small little me coming from quiet little west of Ireland. It was like, I didn't have any experience of this before. It was just like craziness. No, I do not want to commute with that.
Well, a little bit of an extreme example, but it's one of those weird things where
I don't think it's so extreme anymore.
Around the world, the impression that every city in the U.S. has people just picking people off. That's not the way it is. Just for the record, this is not normal. This doesn't happen.
Unfortunately, it happens enough.
Well, leave Detroit out.
Maybe not that exact scenario, but.
Well, what was particularly surreal is like you're listening to them talking about on the radio while you're there, like you're on the I-10, and they're like, they cover it, and then they go into like the Jackson 5, like it's nothing. Yeah.
Well, and that's why you don't listen to the radio. You listen to podcasts.
Yes, excellent point. You don't hear Detour Dan telling you, "Hey, there's an armed man being chased by the police." If someone comes up to your vehicle, don't open the door. And next,
Jackson 5 with the ABCs, baby.
Detour Dan.
Yeah,
he was big in Phoenix. Detour Dan.
Actually, in Phoenix, that does make sense. Yes, that's it's like calling Audible when the traffic in Phoenix sometimes.
I will say they've got amazing roads.
Yeah, they got no weather hardly to deteriorate them. It must be nice because here in Michigan, we're pothole state. It's bad.
So Trent is given the endorsement that he did listen to Roy's podcast when I commuted, which I assume is accounting for one less number when he's not commuting.
Yeah, we can read into that. We know what he's saying.
Yes. So begins the Trent Ty apology tour.
Actually, Trent was he was on a webinar for Control Up at 10 a.m. Irish time this morning. He's like based in Canada. It is 10 p.m. Irish time right now.
Right.
Oh, way to go, Trenton. Hanging in there. He says sorry, but because he's Canadian, it's sorry.
Sorry. Sorry to listen to your podcast anymore, eh?
Yeah. You guys ever hear my Canada joke? Can I do a Canada joke?
I don't know. Will it get us canceled?
It's not offensive. Well, I mean, So, you know how Canada got its name? They put all the letters in a hat and they drew them out. C-A-N-A-D-A. Boom. That's my joke.
You did warn about dad jokes.
Yeah. Exactly. Yes. I did. Now, the thing is, I actually got that joke from another Canadian.
I was going to say,
it's okay,
Yeah.
Not
I'm in Michigan. I'm practically Canada.
Yeah. Yeah. See how many countries we can make fun of today. We haven't said anything.
You're insulting Australians. So.
It's true.
Nah, Trent, you guys are too nice for that stuff. Canadians are way too nice.
He's bringing the Canadians. Yeah, I can't even pass.
Good
awesome.
times.
Good times. Yeah. So right on, gents. Well, let's get into some final thoughts for the day. Rory, final thoughts you want to share with our audience? Any kind of encouragements or, nations you want to insult?
Geez, that reminds me. Conan O'Brien had that sketch. Was it Conan O'Brien insults my homeland? He's he just randomly has stereotypes to see if he get letters because he didn't know where he was being broadcast. But
that's how to do it.
No. Yeah, just kind of to reiterate, I guess, if you're listening to this and you're not someone who does blogging and you think maybe I have nothing worth saying, no one would want to read it, someone else is already doing it, just do it. If you want to, do it. If you don't want to, don't do it. No big deal. Just if you're someone who has that initiative and you think, these people who do it, they're invincible or untouchable or something like that. It's not true. If you want to do public speaking as well, I talk to a lot of people who speak at conferences, and one of the guys, I didn't know other people felt this way at the time, but he's telling me that he didn't eat and it was 2:00 in the afternoon. He's I didn't eat because I have to speak at 4. So he just didn't eat all day because it would mess up his tummy. And that's me too. I'm nervous every single time I'm going to talk. I'm nervous before I do this. You just kind of have to push yourself out there.
Yep. Absolutely.
Right on.
And
Rory,
I think I think it's great now that we have these virtual user groups. You can just go right in front of them and do it. It's easier, I think, than being there in person in front of a bunch of people. So just something to think about.
Absolutely. Rory, thanks so much for being on with us. You can find Rory's podcast at 5bytes, BYTES podcast.com. And encourage you to check that out. Even his YouTube channel, there's a link in the description below. If you're watching on YouTube, there's a link to his channel. You can view that podcast there nowadays, which is kind of cool. So Rory, thanks so much for being on with us.
Thank
you, Rory.
Right on.
Thank you.
Send you back to the green room. Right on. Jeff.
Yeah. So I don't really have any final thoughts because, when do I? But I'm just wondering, I should have asked Rory this, is why doesn't he just have the leprechauns help him out over there? I don't know.
Oh, you totally missed that opportunity. That's
I know. I wonder if he finds any pots of gold too. That'd be kind of cool. I will say this. I've spent some time in Ireland. It is an absolutely, absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous country. And yes, it is the Emerald Isle, because I swear to God, literally everything over there is green from a nature perspective. Even the rocks, so it's great. It's awesome. I love Ireland. I would love to retire there, actually. And I found a spot. I just need to find it again because I didn't write it down.
Well, that's documentation.
Yeah, exactly.
Write it down. It didn't happen, man.
Yeah, tied that all up right there. Brought it all the way around. So, but no, thank you everybody for joining. Really, really appreciate it. And my camera's really bouncing because I keep hitting my desk. So, I'm just so excited. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Right on. Well, I'm going to add to this. There's no reason not to get out there. So there's a saying that I have all the time. I'm going to see if I have this. Yes. So it's a saying I have all the time that, you won't rise to the occasion. You only rise to your level of preparedness. And so when it comes to things like documentation, that means that the more you do it, the easier it gets, the more prepared you're doing it for when it really matters. And so the more you practice doing things like writing when it doesn't matter, the more you'll be able to do it when it does. And so just like Rory is saying, one of the best ways to get out there and do it is just to get out there and do it. And so, don't worry about whether or not you're the best voice to be saying it. The reality is right now, you're probably not, and that's okay. There is no great voice. There's no perfect voice. It's really just important to add your voice. So we encourage you to do so. In fact, I'll say this: if you are interested in being part of what we're doing here with THRIVEcast, make sure you let us know. If you're interested in being on the show, just drop us a message, and we'd love to have you on as well. So I think like Renee saying here, it's like miss the in-person meeting opportunities. This is like the next best thing. So hopefully soon we'll be able to get back together. But in the meantime, this is a great way to get together and do that. So I hope this episode was useful for you. And if you have any questions, feel free to let us know. But thanks once again for being with us. And we will see you next week on another THRIVEcast episode. Cheers, everybody. Thank you for joining us for another edition of THRIVEcast. We truly hope you've enjoyed the experience and have learned a lot from it. Now, what we'd want from you next is to join us at thrive-it.com, where you can get subscribed to our multiple channels, get subscribed to our newsletter, and do more to get yourself to where you want to be in your career and your life in information technology. If there's anything we can do to help you, please give us an email at support@thrive-it.com. We'll see you next time.